Monstrosity in the future. I want to take up here the questions raised by David Rodin. What is it to be a human? At what point does it stop being a human and become a post-human? What is the humanity to which the post-human is post? Does the possibility of a post-humanity presuppose that there is human essence? Or is there some other way of conceiving the human post-human difference? Hence, the reflection that I present here goes in that direction. What I'm going to present then is a draft of a methodological tool in which I want to continue working on it with the feedback that can come out here with your comments. With these tools I want to make a proposal to be able to make an approximation to the understanding from non-human of how the human is built. And as a consequence to be one step ahead to understand from what kind of human we are building the trans-post-human. In this sense, first I propose a reading of the non-human as a monstrosity, understanding it from the concept of objection by Julia Kristeva as the other that constitutes the human. And on the other hand, a reflection on agency through the different perspectives from which the idea of free will linked to the concept of agency can be thought of. Then, my reflection goes along two axes. First, how do we build the other, the non-human of the human? Namely, transhuman, post-human, unhuman, inhuman, subhuman. Is it from our desires and beliefs? Or instead of this from our fears, perversions, and limits? The abject. Abjection is, as Julia said, our violent reaction, horror, vomit to a threatened breakdown in meaning caused by the loss of the distinction between subject and object or between self and other. The primary example is the corpse, which dramatically reminds us of our own materiality. However, other items can elicit the same reaction, the open wound, shit sewage. Even a particularly immoral crime, e.g. Auschwitz. Kristeva posits that abjection is something that we must experience in the establishment of such boundaries as self and other, human and animal. There are things that are repulsive and horrible in life, things that someone may think are grotesque and formless. That is what has been repressed. Of that at which one does not want to look or smell or experience. Kristeva contrasts the object to the abject, which is connected to the Freudian mechanism or process of repression, denial and repudiation that are part of the formation of the human subject. The abject would thus be the object of primal repression. The abject is related to perversion. Hence, the abject is gradually rejected through exorcisms and rituals of cleanliness, toilet training, eating habits, and so on. Through these actions in horror, the other is abjected, and in race signifying horror, reconciliation with it is possible. The abject shatters the wall of repression and its judgments. It transforms death into a sort of life through a new significance that constitutes the human. I am considering here the monstrous as part of the non-human, hence both the inhuman and the unhuman that are outside of the human belong to monstrosity. A monster, from Latin monstrum, is a very broad concept linked to mythology and fiction. It applies to any being that has characteristics, generally negative, outside the regular order of nature.
Two kind of monsters. Then unhuman is the monster that no one wants to be, the one that everyone rejects, the amorphous, the waste.
It is the chimera, and it is the corpse as well. According to Cotton, it embraces too the superhuman, the supernatural, the demonic, and the subhuman, the supposedly disjunctive animal, vegetable, and mineral kingdoms, the realms of artifice, technology, and fantasy. More else, the unhuman does not necessarily means the inhuman, in the sense of conspicuous or extraordinary cruelty. Then what is inhuman is what is forbidden. It is perversion, but also the monster in another sense, the one that pushes the limits beyond the monster and that many alienated by civilization secretly admire. Unhuman and inhuman remain marginalized from the rest, hidden in the dark, in the subconscious. They require the oblivion of consciousness. Absent from the light but always looking for the crack that makes them appear from time to make room for the other world. In this sense is then that one of the ways in which the monstrous can be understood is from the abject. The no-human is considered then as the object file and expels to preserve the subject. So how can we think of the non-human, the unhuman, in such a way that we can have an understanding of the limits of the human? Derrida shows how this violence has been exercised. For example, in his deconstructive reading on the animal issue, he points out that anthropocentric logic leads us to all kinds of exclusions. It is thought that if living beings are not human, they can therefore be put into a single category. Hence, the violence that such a conceptual simplification means is for purposes of understanding other sentient beings. An absurdity that has led man to exercise the violence that exists in the industrial treatment of meat for consumption, leading to animals to the slaughterhouse and to be treated from the beginning of their lives until their death with absolute cruelty. Another example is the case of the cruel treatment to the immigrants in the borders, considered them as subhumans. Is free will an illusion? The second part of this reflection goes on the notion of free will linked to agency. I have found great controversy around the subject of free will. Some argue that it exists as a conscious rational act, while others show that there are conditioning and determining factors that limit or, in the extreme case, argue that free will is just an illusion. In philosophy, Heidegger said that the human is his possibilities, and human possibilities are limited by what he calls thrones. To describe humans' individual existences as being thrown, dwarfen, into the world. Nietzsche is known as a critic of Judeo-Christian morality and religions in general. One of the arguments he raised against the truthfulness of these doctrines is that they are based upon the concept of free will, which, in his opinion, does not exist, is entirely fictional. Man does not want to choose, man wants to affirm himself will to power. In structuralism, it is about analyzing a specific field as a complex system of interrelated parts, looking for the structures through which meaning is produced within a culture. We could say that those meanings that are built from the culture also influence our decisions. For psychology, in the field of psychology, the subconscious refers to that part of consciousness that we are unaware of. It is information that we are not actively aware of in the moment, but that can influence us nonetheless, such as things that are heard, seen, or remembered. The unconscious mind, on the other hand, is a term coined by Freud to refer to a part of the mind that cannot be known by the conscious mind, and includes socially unacceptable ideas, wishes, and desires, traumatic memories, and painful emotions that have been repressed. From this perspective, it is questioned how much our decisions are influenced by the repressed. However, for biology and specifically the neurosciences argue that there is no such free will. Microbiology, for its part, with recent studies on the microbiome, tells us that this is where certain hormones and neurotransmitters are produced that have an influence on our state of mind and therefore on our decisions. Desde la neurobiology, a radical position is that of us who maintains that free will is an illusion and that we are determined by the interaction of our biology with our environment. I'm going to present now a resume of my work in the residency.
I start with Odioika from a critical posthumanism reflection with these questions. What conditions needs to ceasing to be unhuman? What are the possible words to a posthuman being? And I have to review the history of technological and biological modifications, to review the context, sociological, historical, and ecological. I think about a symbiotic biological mechanical body. Biological body with embodiment, and the other hand, the libidinal body, where I think about agency, intentions, desires, and beliefs. So the posthuman symbiotic body has agency and a subject, or a subject with agency.
Here, I decided to make a stop and go a step back, or rather, a step to the non-human and reflect on the non-human, and I started working on the residency in an alternative project that I called Unhuman, the Twist in the Surface.